Thinking of replacing your interior door? Let me say this. There's a lot of things that go into replacing a door. It's not as easy as you might think. I replaced and repaired like 1,000 doors. I'll go over everything you need to know to replace it correctly. How to customize a new door if you need to. How to install hinges, lock sets, tips, and things to look out for. If you're thinking of taking on this task, I suggest watching this video in its entirety to understand what problems you might come across. Then evaluate your situation and see if it's something you think you can do. If you think you can and decide to do the work, I have markers down in the description so you can skip to the section you only need to see. I also have links in the description to everything you see me use in the video. Now, for the average person's sake, for the most part, I will be using the minimum basic tools to get this job done. So let's get to it. Chapter 1. Evaluate the door. Here's a bedroom door. It doesn't look bad, right? Let's investigate a little closer. Yeah, this is definitely a replacer. Now, the techniques done in this video can be applied to every interior door, whether it's an 8-foot tall mansion door or a solid heavy door. It's pretty much the same. Chapter 2. What kind of door do you need? So the first thing when replacing the door is knowing what style, size, and kind of door you are replacing. Let's start with style. How many panels is it? Is it a 6-panel, 2-panel, or is it just a slab? Does it have wood grain or is it smooth? Is it hollow or is it solid? Knocking on the door will let you know. You can hear and feel the difference. Now for the size. The thing you need to know is that big box stores sell doors in standard sizes. The standard height is 80 inches. The standard widths are 24, 28, 30, 32, and 36. If you're looking for anything outside of these measurements, most likely it will be a special order, take weeks to get, and be expensive. Measure the door if you can. If it's a standard size, as I stated earlier, great. You can skip to the install part of this video. If not, and you see that the width or the height is not a standard size, you might have to buy a standard size door, then customize it to fit in the opening. Chapter 3. Measuring for a customized door. To get the size you need to customize the door, you could measure the existing door, but I found that's not always a good idea. Because what if the door was too big from the jump, and that's the reason why the door fell apart in the first place? Or it had a big old gap. You'll be pissed if you cut your new door, then find out it has the same big old gap. So for that reason, I like to measure the door opening. On this jamb here, for the top of the jamb to the floor, it is 80 inches. So if you put a new door here, it will rub on the floor and on the top. It won't fit. So you have to cut an inch off the bottom of the new door. If I cut an inch off the new door, that will give me a 1/4 inch space on the top and 3/4 inch space at the bottom. Another thing is that all door jamb opening widths are not the same. You might come across where from here to here is not the same width as from here to here. The same for the bottom. Measure all 3 spots, the top, middle, and bottom. Those 3 measurements will let you know how wide to cut the door, if you need to cut it. With that being said, let me show you what I'm talking about. The height is 80 inches, so we need to cut the door to 79. Now I'm going to measure the width at the top first. Be careful not to measure from the door stop. Measure from here. It is 30 inches. A standard door comes 30 inches, so that won't fit either. The door will need to have some of it cut off from the side. Now let's check it in the middle. That says 29 7/8. The bottom says 29 7/8 as well. These different measurements let you know the jamb is not square. You can also confirm this with a 2-foot level for the top and at least a 4-foot level for the sides. I'm going to call this opening 29 7/8. Now that I have that measurement, I like to subtract a 1/4 inch of whatever the measurement is and cut my door down to that size, which will bring my door measurement down to 29 5/8. Doing this will give me a 1/8 gap on each side of the door. Also, let me mention this. This is an old building, as you can see. It has brick walls. There's no way I can manipulate the jamb. I have to customize the door. If you have drywall walls and your door jamb is not leveled, you might be able to pre-drill a hole in the jamb and drill a long screw in it to push the jamb over some. Be careful doing this because it might push in the jamb too much and you might end up breaking the jamb. If you do decide to do it, cover the screw hole with spackle when you're done. Let me just say, even after doing that, your jamb might not even go far enough to clear the door. You still might have to shave the door. Chapter 4. Buying a door. Now that you know the size door you need, let's talk about buying options. As I stated before, when you go to a big box store, all the doors they sell will be 80 inches tall and the width will be either 24, 28, 30, 32, or 36 inch wide. Using the door I need as an example, I will need to get a 30-inch door and cut it down a fit. When you go buy a door, know the size, style, and kind. Know that they sell doors with and without a doorknob hole in it. The problem is, the new door with the hole in it, the hole might not be in the same spot as it is in the door you're replacing. When you go hang it, you'll see the lock is not lined up with the latch. So it's better to buy a door without the doorknob hole in it, unless you measure from the top of your door to the center of the hole on your door. Then measure the same thing on the new door you're gonna buy. If that matches, then you lucked out. Buy the door, but the odds are slim. I mean very slim. Chapter 5. Cutting some off the side of the door. Now, depending how much you need to take off from the side of the door will determine what tool to use. If it's a small amount, a hand planer should work. If it's only an eighth off the complete side, you should use an electric planer. If you need to cut off a 1/4 inch or more, you'll have to use a circular saw, a track saw, or a table saw. For the door I'm working on, I need to cut 3/8 off. I could cut this in the field with a circular saw, but that's a lot harder to do. Watch my video how to use a circular saw with a guide if you decide to use a circular saw. I'll be cutting this on a table saw at the shop. Now before cutting off some of the side, let me mention, the max you should cut off any side of the door is a 1/4. Look at the top of the door. Whatever side looks the thickest, cut it off that side. If you cut too much off one side, the screws won't hold good and the screws will come loose, causing the door to fail. I need to cut 3/8 off the door, so I'll cut a 1/4 inch off this side and 1/8 off the other side. You can make these cuts on a circular saw or track saw, but I find a table saw works best. Cut the 1/4 off. Flip the door and cut off 1/8. Now some of the sides are made of wood. If this was wood, it would look much rougher. You'll have to sand it by hand or a belt sander. The belt sander works best. The corners are sharp, so you'll have to knock those corners down too. Now's a good time to spray your primer on it. When it dries, it'll feel a little rough, so hit it with a hand sander. Chapter 6. Cutting some off the bottom. If you have to cut it to height, always cut it off the bottom of the door. It is less noticeable. I need to cut 1 inch off the door. This bottom piece is usually 1 inch thick, so when you cut 1 inch off, you'll see that the inside is hollow, and the door will no longer have structural support at the bottom of the door. It will need a piece of wood back in it. You could use a 2x4 cut to size, but I'm going to use the same piece. If this was a solid door, you can just cut it and you'll be done. Cutting this on a table saw is a bit tricky. I don't recommend it for beginners. Use a circular saw or a track saw. I do this a lot, so I know how to push it through without it binding up. You see it's hollow in here? In order for this piece to fit back in here, you have to cut the top skin out, and you have to cut the ends off too. Doing that will make it fit right back in it again. Measure for the thickness of the insert. The door insert is usually 1 1/8 thick. It's best cutting this on the table saw. If you don't have a table saw, use a 2x4 because it gives you more of a surface to use to be able to cut the size you need safely. Cut the ends off. Before you can put the piece back in, you might come across this. There's sometimes support cardboard or foam in the way. It'll keep your insert from going up all the way. To take care of this problem, use a putty knife to detach it from the skin. Then push it to the side. There still might be some glue on the skin. Use the putty knife to scrape it off. Now check the fit of the insert. Before you put it in permanently, put glue on the top of the piece. That way, when you push it in place, the glue will spread itself down onto the piece. Here, put the glue on the bottom edge. This tool will spread the glue across the bottom of the piece. Put some on the side. Carefully put it in place. Careful not to push it in too far. If you do, drill a screw in the piece so you can have something to grab to pull it back down. I got 1-inch nails in the brad nail gun. You can use a hammer and nails. Just make sure you use nails with the head like this. These heads will let the nails kind of sink into the wood. Then you can cover it with spackle. If you use nails with heads like this, you'll be able to see them and they will stick out like a sore thumb. Don't use them. Flip the door. Nail the other side. Feel it to make sure there are none sticking out. If the nail is, hit it down with a hammer. Fill the hole with spackle. You can see the wood grain goes up and down here. Then from here to here, it goes side to side. So for that, I like to spread the spackle side to side up to this point. Then on this part, I'll go down with it. This will give the spackle the wood grain look. Flip the door over and do the same thing. Now that the door is cut to size and it will fit in the opening, let's go install it. Chapter 7. Look out before installing the door. Before installing the door, here's something to look out for. If you see the hinge is not counter sunk in the door, the reason someone did this is because when you look at the jamb, the hinge on the jamb itself is counter sunk too much into the jamb. So if you kind of sink the hinge on the door, what's going to happen is the wood on the door is going to hit the wood on the jamb, and your door is not going to close properly. It's going to want to bounce open. It also puts a strain on the hinge. That strain will make the screws holding the hinge to the door fail. The way you fix this is to remove the screws and put a shim behind the hinge. Then put the screws back. This will flush the hinge out. Then you can countersink the hinge on the door. Most likely in your house, you'll have to countersink the hinges, and this won't be the case for you. I just wanted to point this out in case you come across something like this. This unit here is an old housing development, and they're trying to get this place demoed. So as far as making everything perfect here, it's not necessary. So I'm going to do like they did here. But I'll show you how to reset the hinge in the door later. Okay, now let's get to the install. Chapter 8. New door install. Remove the screws from the bottom hinge on the door. Set the screws to the side for later. For the top hinge, Remove it by taking out the pin. Use a hammer and a center punch, or you can use a nail. Remove the door. I got the door outside. Now remove all the hardware. Before removing the hinge, mark a line on the hinge indicating the edge of the door. This will let you know how far back to put the hinge on the new door. Done with the old door, move it out of the way. I got the new door on my fancy door stand right here. You can just lean it up against the wall. Okay, now, the hinge goes on first. If you had to cut some off the side of the door, like I did, you want to put the hinge on the edge with the thicker side. It has more meat for the screws to bite into. If you did not have to cut anything off the side of the door, notice some doors are made with a slight bevel on the ends. This is so the door can open and close without hitting the jamb. Look at the door from the top and look at the ends. If you see a slight bevel, install the hardware on the door with this configuration. This will optimize the function of the door and could avoid an install problem. With that being said, let's go over how to get the measurements on where to place the top hinge. For that, we need to go back inside. Measure from this point, not the doorstop trim, to the top of the hinge. It is 6 7/8. Now drop it down a quarter. So that will give me 6 5/8. Dropping it down a quarter will give me a 1/4 inch space between the door and the jamb. In your house, you might be able to drop it down 1/8. Here's a side note about that. The correct gap size around a door is about 1/8 of an inch. If you believe your door jamb is completely square, try and go for that 1/8 gap around the door. If it's not, your door will not shut because it's going to hit the jamb somewhere, or your door will rub on the jamb, making it hard to open and close properly, which will cause the door to fail and delaminate. A 1/4 inch space is the max space you can have where it still looks good and you can avoid having to shave the door. But even sometimes with a 1/4 inch gap, you still might have to shave the door some. You can use a 2 foot and a 4 foot level to check for squareness. And that's the end of my side note. Now that we got the measurement, let's go back outside to the door. I'm going to go 6 5/8, put a mark, straight edge, B square, mark it out. And now you can take your hinge and the marks that you put here, line it up. And the door, I believe, careful not to put it the wrong way, so it'll be here. Take your countersink bit. How that works when you push down. Sticks out the drill bit. This Ryobi drill bit works perfect for this. It pre-drills the holes exactly in the middle of the holes on the hinges. It's important that you pre-drill the holes for your screws. If the side was made from wood, it can split the wood when you put a screw in it. If that happens, your screw won't hold for too long and you'll have a whole other issues to deal with. Now screw on the top hinge. I'm not going to countersink this hinge, but if you're going to, let me show you how to do it. Chapter 9, Countersinking the Hinge. First, only put 2 screws in to hold the hinge. Then use a utility knife with a sharp blade to score around the hinge. Use the hinge as your guide. Make 2 or 3 passes. You only have to go in as deep as the thickness of the hinge. See if you can see that. Only go halfway on this part because you might go past the hinge. When you do this, switch sides to help prevent that. Remove the hinge. Use a hammer and a 1-inch chisel to notch for the hinge. If you're not used to doing this, Practice on the old door. The utility knife can help with this process too. Check the fit. A little more. When it's good, put the screws in it. Now with just the top hinge attached to the door, hang the door back on the jamb. Remember, for the top hinge, we removed the pin to separate the hinge. Use the pin to put it back together. Don't push the pin down all the way. The door will have to get removed again later. For the bottom hinge, get the drill ready with the drill bit to pre-drill your holes. The screws should be nearby too. Hold the hinge against the door. Try to keep the same reveal here as it is on the top hinge. Hold the door and the hinge against the door with your thumb. Pre-drill one hole and put one screw in it for now. This will hold it in place to free up your hands to put in the other screws. Connecting the bottom hinge like this is the best way to get the exact location of the bottom hinge on the door. Now at this point, if you need to countersink the bottom hinge, remove the door again by removing both pins. Then do the same procedure as you did for the top hinge. When you're done with the hinges, check the fit. If your door closes with no problem, you can skip to the lock install part. Chapter 10. New door not shutting. Troubleshooting. For this door, even with a 1/4 inch drop, the door is still hitting at the top on the lock side. To remedy this, lowering the door is not a good idea. You're going to make more holes, and if you countersunk the hinges, you'll have to reposition the hinge and countersink the hinges again, leaving a void that you will have to spackle. That's mucho feo. Ugly, my friends. Dropping the door down will also make the gap on top of the door by the hinge side bigger. The gap might be so big that it'll be wider than the door stop, creating a straight through hole at the top corner of the door. Another thing, I also didn't countersink the bottom hinge on the door. If I do countersink it, the door will drop down like that, which will bring the top down, but not enough. For this, the best option is to shave some off the top of the door from here to here. Look to see if there's another problem. Look at the gap size all around the door. This is a good size gap going all the way up, so this side is good. On the hinge side, the door is hitting the jamb at the bottom. Even if I shave some off the top, the door is still hitting the jamb at this point, and it's not going to let the door close properly. It'll want to swing the door open. If the door does close, it can yank the hinge from the door on the jamb, causing the screws to come loose. For this situation, because it has a good sized gap on this side, I'm going to shave a little bit from here down. Mark what needs to be shaved. And then for the top, you can go on this side and try to see where it starts to hit. Looks like it's from here, but I'm gonna shave from here that way. About that much on this end. So I'm gonna shave it on an angle. Okay, I got the door outside. I'm gonna shave this part down first. If it's not a large amount, use a hand planer. Sometimes composite wood edges is a little harder to shave than real wood. When you're done planing, you can hand sand it. Make sure to knock down the corners. To shave the top, I'm going to use a regular planer up to here. Put another reference stop mark. Be careful using this. It throws out a lot of dust over here, so I like to keep my hand over it to control where the dust goes. Watch out for the cord. Flat. This is awkward versus doing it on the top. Top is much easier. But you see where the blade is. So you want to start it up here and then work your way down. You can rent one of these and practice on the old door. You can adjust how much the planer shaves off with the knob on the side of the planer. Now hand the door back up and check the fit. If it's still hitting or rubbing somewhere, mark where it's rubbing, take it back down, and follow the same steps accordingly. If it fits, now the door lock set can be installed. Chapter 11. Install the lock set. To install the lock set, have the door hung on the jamb. Put a mark on the center of the striker plate. Transfer that mark to the door. Use a speed square to make a straight line. Remove the door from the pins. Don't remove the door by removing the screws. Every time you do, the grip on the screws won't be as strong. Remove it from the pins. Again, use a hammer and center punch. Take the door back outside. Before making a hole, I need to discuss the hole saw kit from Ryobi that I will be using. To use it properly, we need to look at the hardware we will be installing. This will let us know how to set up the Ryobi tool. The main thing we need to look for is the back set measurement. The back set is the distance from the edge of the door to the center of the hole. It will be either 2 3/8 or 2 3/4. To find out what you have, you can put a line in the center of the hole on your old door, then measure from the edge of the door to the line. Or you can measure the back set latch itself. Once we know the measurement, let's look at the Ryobi door lock install kit to see how to set it up and use it. Here's everything that comes in the kit. Put the hole saw together like this. Put the paddle bit in here like this. Now for this part, it has 2 spacers that get positioned depending on the thickness of your door and what size the back set your door has. Let's position the back set spacer first. Pop it in. There are markings on the part indicating the back set size position. 2 3/8 on this side and 2 3/4 on this side. Most interior doors are 2 3/8, so position the spacer on this side. The next spacer is for the 1-inch hole on the edge of the door. Exterior doors are thicker than interior doors. They are 1 3/4 thick. An interior door is 1 3/8 thick. Set the spacer for an interior door. Pop the spacer in the position of the 1 3/8 setup. There are also markings on this for this as well. Now it's ready for you to drill your holes. Look for the center mark you made on the side of the door earlier. Position the jig on top of that line. Center the jig with that line. There is an indicating line on the jig for that too. Now that it is centered, use the self-centering drill bit to pre-drill the screw holes. Pre-drill your holes. You will split the wood if you don't, and your screws will never get tight. Pre-drill your holes. Put your screws in. Put the hole saw on the drill and drill your knob hole. My technique here is to squat down a little, put my knees up against the door to keep it from falling over while I apply pressure with the hole saw. You could just lean it up against the wall. Don't go all the way through. That will blow out the other side. To be on the safe side, flip the jig, then finish drilling the hole from the other side. Now use the 1-inch paddle bit with the guide. Drill all the way through. Remove the jig. Okay, so now we're left with this. Take your old lock, put it in, screw it in again. Keep it from moving. Then you take your utility knife and go right along the edge of it. I like to cut it square, even though these are round, quarter round. I'm only going halfway because I don't want it to accidentally go past the back set. Score it a couple of times and make sure you go deep enough. Remove the back set. Use a 1-inch chisel to chisel out the wood. See, I accidentally took a little piece out. Don't worry if that happens. I'll show you how to fix that later. But do try to be careful doing this to avoid that happening to you. Okay, now the flat side goes where the hinge side is. So if you see the hinges on this side, you want the flat part facing that way. Hinges on this side of the door, you want the flat part going that way. Check the fit, make sure it's flush, it's flat all the way around. Put a screw in it. Use a little bit of spackle. Fill that void. And put the lock on again. The locking part goes on the hinge side. These quick set locks have a special design which makes it easier to install the lock set, but it's a little tricky sometimes to position it correctly. Tighten up the screws and check it by turning the knob a couple of times. Now take the door inside and see how it fits. Rehang the door and don't put the pins all the way down yet, in case you need to remove the door again. Sometimes you have to give the hinge a tap with the hammer to get it to go in place. Look to see if you need to tap it up or down. Now check how the door functions. It's functioning as it should. It's not rubbing anywhere. The lock latches, so we're good. That's how you replace an interior door. I hope this video helped you out. You should check out my other videos on my channel. I'm sure you'll find something else helpful to you. Don't forget to hit that like, bell, and subscribe button for me. Until next time, be blessed, my people. Peace.